The bank statement trembled in my hands as I stared at the unfamiliar account number. 6 figures, quietly tucked away in some offshore haven I'd never heard of. My husband's name was right there in black and white, along with a transaction history that made my stomach turn. I'm Esme, and this is how I discovered my husband and sister had been planning to destroy my life. Jorge? I called out, my voice echoing through our empty house. The silence that greeted me was deafening. His closet stood open, half empty, like a wound in our bedroom wall. My hands shook as I dialed his number, but it went straight to voicemail. The front door clicked open. For a moment, my heart leaped, but it was just Ella, my best friend, letting herself in with the spare key. Esme, you sounded weird on the phone. What's wrong? I couldn't speak. I just handed her the statement. Holy shit, she whispered, scanning the document. When did you find this? 20 minutes ago. Jorge's gone and... My voice cracked. Sloane isn't answering her phone either. Ella's eyes widened. Your sister? No way. I pulled up my phone and showed her the text I'd received from my mother an hour ago. Honey, is everything okay? Sloane just called to say she's taking an unexpected trip abroad. She seemed strange. I should have seen it coming, I said, pacing the room. The late nights at work, the secretive phone calls, how they'd both go quiet when I entered the room. God, I'm such an idiot. Stop that right now. Ella grabbed my shoulders. You're not an idiot. You're an auditor, for Christ's sake. One of the best in the city. That's when it hit me. I walked to Jorge's home office, Ella following close behind. The laptop was gone, but he'd left his external hard drive. Typical Jorge, always careless with the details. What are you doing? Ella asked as I booted up my computer. Using my skills, I replied, plugging in the drive. Jorge never was good at covering his tracks. He probably thought deleting his browser history would be enough. 15 minutes of digging revealed everything. Emails, flight confirmations, property inquiries in the Cayman Islands, and photos. So many photos of them together, dating back months. That son of a bitch, Ella breathed, looking over my shoulder. And your own sister. My phone buzzed. A text from Jorge. I'm sorry. By the time you read this, we'll be gone. The divorce papers will arrive tomorrow. Please don't try to find us. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. It wasn't hot. It was ice cold and clarifying. Ella, I said, my voice steady for the first time that morning. I need you to be honest with me. Do you still have those contacts at the bank from when you worked there? She nodded slowly. Why? Because I'm not going to try to find them. I turned to face her, a plan already forming in my mind. I'm going to destroy them. Legally, methodically, and completely. Esme. Ella's voice held a note of concern. They think they're so clever, I continued, pulling up Jorge's investment portfolio. But they forgot what I do for a living. I find people's mistakes for a career. And Jorge? I pointed to a series of suspicious transactions. He's made plenty. What are you going to do? I stood up, grabbing my phone. First, I'm calling Ramon. He's still a practicing lawyer, right? Yeah, but... Good. Then I'm calling Stefan. He taught me everything I know about forensic accounting, and he owes me a favor. I felt eerily calm now, focused. They took everything from me, Ella. My marriage, my sister, my savings. But they forgot one thing. What's that? They forgot who I am. I pulled up Ramon's number. And by the time I'm done, they'll never forget again. Ella was quiet for a moment, then a slow smile spread across her face. Need a partner in crime? The legal kind, of course. Always. I pressed dial, listening to it ring. They wanted to play games? Fine, let's play. You need to see this, Ella said, barging into my home office 3 days later. She thrust her phone in my face, nearly knocking over my coffee. Instagram, public account, posted 2 hours ago. There they were, my husband and sister, lounging by an infinity pool at some luxury resort. Jorge's arm draped around Sloane's shoulders, both of them grinning like teenagers. The caption read, "Starting our new life together. Vos blessed." They're in Barbados, Ella continued, scrolling through more photos. The Royal Westmore Resort. Jorge always did have expensive taste. On my dime, I muttered, saving the photos to my evidence folder. Ramon's going to love this. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Ramon's familiar voice filled the room on speaker. Esme, I've got something. You free to meet? 30 minutes later, we sat in Ramon's downtown office, surrounded by law books and the smell of expensive coffee. So, Ramon began, spreading documents across his desk. Remember those suspicious transactions you flagged? They're connected to a shell company Jorge set up 3 months ago. He's been funneling money through it, probably thinking he's clever. But, I leaned forward, but he made a rookie mistake. The company's registered in Delaware, but he's been operating it from your home address. That's a clear violation of corporate registration laws. Ella, who'd insisted on coming along, spoke up. What does that mean for us? It means, Ramon smiled, we can freeze those assets pending investigation. He won't be able to touch that money until this is sorted out. I felt a flutter of satisfaction. How long will that take? With the evidence you've gathered, could be months, maybe longer. Ramon's eyes twinkled. Plenty of time for the rest of your plan. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Stefan, my old mentor. Perfect timing, I said, answering. You're on speaker. Esme, darling. Stefan's gravelly voice filled the room. I did some digging into that investment venture Jorge was planning. It's worse than we thought. How so? It's a classic Ponzi scheme. The whole operation's being investigated by the SEC. Jorge probably doesn't know yet, but when it breaks... Stefan chuckled. Well, let's just say his new paradise might not last long. Should we warn him? Ella asked. I shook my head. He made his bed. There's more, Stefan continued. I found something interesting in the property records. That house they're planning to buy? Jorge put down a deposit using funds from your joint account before he left. Ramon straightened in his chair. That's perfect. We can use that to establish intent to defraud. Esme, with your permission, I can file an emergency injunction today. Do it, I said without hesitation. Hit them where it hurts. After the meeting, Ella and I walked to a nearby cafe. She'd been unusually quiet. You okay? I asked as we sat down with our drinks. Just processing. It's like watching a masterclass in revenge. She stirred her latte. But are you sure you want to go through with all of this? It seems intense. I pulled out my phone and showed her another Instagram post from Sloan. This one showed them shopping, designer bags in hand. They're spending my money, Ella. Money I worked 60-hour weeks to earn. While they're living it up in paradise, I'm sleeping in an empty house with a broken heart. Fair point. Besides, I continued, this isn't just about revenge, it's about justice. And maybe... I paused, considering my words carefully. Maybe it's about making sure they never do this to anyone else. My phone lit up with a text from Ramon. Injunction filed. They'll be served within 24 hours. Prepare for fallout. I showed Ella the message, and a slow smile spread across her face. Well then, I guess paradise is about to get a little less peaceful. You know what the funny thing is? I said, finishing my coffee. Jorge always said I was too focused on my career, too detail-oriented. Called me boring once. And now those same skills are going to be his undoing. Ella finished. Exactly. I stood up, gathering my things. Come on, we need to meet Stefan. He said he found something about an estate loophole we need to discuss. As we left the cafe, I caught my reflection in the window. For the first time since finding that bank statement, I was smiling. It wasn't a happy smile exactly, but it was the smile of someone who had finally found their power again. And I was just getting started. Stefan's office hadn't changed in the decade since I'd worked under him. Same worn leather chairs, same wall of financial texts, same smell of Earl Grey tea. The investment scheme is worse than we thought, Stefan said, sliding a folder across his desk. Jorge's planning to sink your savings into a development project in Costa Rica. On paper, it looks legitimate. In reality... He tapped the documents with his finger. I flipped through the pages, my auditor's brain immediately spotting the red flags. These profit projections are impossible. Exactly. Stefan leaned back. The whole thing's a house of cards. The developer's been under investigation for months. Jorge's about to lose everything he stole from you, and he doesn't even know it. Unless someone warns the authorities first. Ella chimed in from her corner chair. Stefan's eyes met mine. My thoughts exactly. An anonymous tip from a concerned financial professional could speed things along. My phone buzzed. A text from Ramon. Injunction served. Check your email. I pulled up my inbox to find a video attachment. The security camera footage from the Royal Westmore Resort showed Jorge being handed the legal documents poolside. His face turned from confusion to rage in seconds. Sloane, sitting beside him, jumped up and started gesturing wildly. "Oh, this is better than Netflix," Ella said, watching over my shoulder. "That's just the appetizer," Stefan said, pulling out another folder. "Remember that estate planning we did last year? The one Jorge insisted on?" Of course, he was obsessed with protecting our assets. Well, Stefan smiled. He made a crucial mistake. The trust he set up? He never filed the final paperwork to remove your access. You're still listed as primary trustee. I sat up straighter. What does that mean? It means you can legally challenge any major financial decisions he makes using trust assets, including, Stefan paused for effect, that luxury condo they just put a deposit on. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Jorge. "What the hell are you doing? Call off your lawyers, or you'll regret it." "Empty threats," Ramon said when I called him. "He's panicking. The development company just got served with a federal warrant, and your anonymous tip about Jorge's involvement is being investigated." "How long until it all falls apart?" "Days, maybe hours. The SEC doesn't mess around with these cases." That evening, Ella and I sat on my patio, watching the sunset and sipping wine. My laptop was open, showing Jorge and Sloane's increasingly frantic social media posts. "Look at this one," Ella pointed. "Sometimes people try to destroy you, but karma knows the truth. The irony is incredible." "They still think they're the victims," I said, closing the laptop, "even now." Speaking of karma, Ella hesitated. Stefan mentioned something about Sloane's old trust fund, the one from your grandparents. "What about it?" "Apparently, there's a morality clause. If any beneficiary is found to be involved in fraudulent activities," I nearly choked on my wine. "Are you serious?" "Stefan's looking into it, but if it's true and if Jorge's investment scheme is proven fraudulent, Sloane loses everything. Not just what they stole from me, but her inheritance too." The thought should have made me sad. Instead, I felt oddly peaceful. My phone lit up with a notification. The SEC had issued their preliminary findings on the Costa Rica development scheme. Jorge's name was prominently featured. "Turn on the news," I texted Ramon. Minutes later, the story broke across financial networks. "Major investment fraud uncovered. Dozens of investors at risk." Jorge's company was listed among the primary participants. Ella refreshed Instagram. Jorge and Sloane's accounts had both gone dark. "What now?" she asked. "Now we wait," I said, pouring more wine. "The dominoes are falling exactly where they should." My phone buzzed one final time that evening. A message from Sloane. "Sis, please, we need to talk. Things aren't what they seem." I showed the message to Ella, who snorted. The nerve of her. "You know what's funny?" I said, deleting the message without responding. "They thought they were so clever, running off to paradise with my money. But they forgot the most important thing about paradise." "What's that?" "Paradise is expensive. And now?" I smiled, watching the last rays of sun disappear. Now they can't afford it. The next morning, Stefan called with news that made everything even sweeter. "The morality clause is valid," he said. "And Sloane's trust fund? It's already been frozen pending investigation." I hung up and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who'd found that bank statement just days ago. She was stronger, sharper, and she wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. "You're not going to believe what I found," Ramon announced, striding into my office without knocking. His tie was loose, and he clutched a stack of papers like they were made of gold. "The estate loophole?" I asked, clearing space on my desk. "Better." He spread out the documents. "Sloane's been playing both sides. Look at these transfer records." I scanned the papers, my jaw dropping. Hidden accounts, secret transfers, all in Sloane's name alone. She'd been siphoning money from Jorge even as they planned their escape together. "Your sister's been busy," Ramon said. "She's got accounts Jorge doesn't know about. She's been skimming from the money he stole from you." Ella, who'd been typing at her laptop, let out a low whistle. "A thief stealing from a thief. That's almost poetic." "It gets better," Ramon continued. "Remember that property they bought in Barbados? Sloane put her name on the deed, not his. Jorge has no legal claim to it." I sat back, processing this information. "Does he know?" "Not yet, but he will." Ramon's grin was wolfish. The property records are public. Anyone could find them. Anyone like an anonymous tip to Jorge's lawyer? Ella suggested. Exactly. I pulled up my email. Send everything you've got, Ramon. I want to do this right. While Ramon compiled the documents, my phone buzzed with a notification. Another Instagram post from Sloan, this one showing her alone at a beachfront restaurant. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to look out for yourself. Your self-care, you're blessed." Look at the background, Ella said, pointing at my screen. That's not the Royal Westmore. She's moved to a different hotel. I checked the location tag. The Azure Bay Resort. That's on the other side of the island from where Jorge's staying. They're already splitting up? Ella asked. No, I smiled. They're just not as united as they thought they were, and it's about to get worse. Ramon finished organizing the files. Done. Want me to send the anonymous tip? Not yet. I pulled up property records on my computer. First, let's make sure the estate loophole is properly exploited. Stefan said I'm still primary trustee, right? Right, which means I can challenge any property purchases made with trust assets. I started typing, including that luxury condo they put a deposit on. 2 hours later, everything was in place. The property challenge was filed, the trust assets were frozen, and Ramon's anonymous tip about Sloan's secret accounts was ready to go. Send it, I told Ramon. He hit send, then looked at his watch. Given the time difference, Jorge's lawyer should see this in about an hour. Perfect timing, Ella said, showing me her phone. Look who just posted. Jorge's latest Instagram story showed him at a business meeting, trying to salvage what he could of his investments. The caption, "Building our future, one deal at a time. Entrepreneur life." Should we tell him there won't be any deals? Ella asked. No need, I replied. His lawyer will do that for us. My phone rang. It was Stefan. The trust freeze just went through, he said without preamble. All assets are locked pending review, including that condo deposit. How long will the review take? With the evidence we've submitted, months at least. Maybe longer if we find more irregularities. He paused. Which, knowing Jorge's financial habits, we probably will. Just then, Ella gasped. Esme, look at this. She turned her laptop around. On the screen was an email from one of her banking contacts. Sloan had just tried to transfer a large sum from one of her secret accounts, and the transfer had been denied. The freeze is working, Ramon said, reading over my shoulder. She can't access any of it. My phone buzzed again. A text from Sloan. What have you done? This isn't fair. Before I could respond, another message came through, this time from Jorge. My lawyer just called. What the hell is going on with Sloan? I showed the messages to Ella and Ramon, and now they turn on each other. You're not going to respond? Ella asked. No need. I closed my laptop. They'll do all the work for us. Ramon gathered his papers. Want me to keep monitoring the situation? Please. And Ramon? I called as he reached the door. Thank you for everything. He nodded. Justice isn't always swift, but it is sweet. After he left, Ella and I sat in silence for a moment. Finally, she spoke. You okay? You know what? I said, surprising myself with the truth in my words. I really am. For the first time since this all started, I feel like I'm winning. You're not just winning, Ella corrected. You're demolishing them. My phone buzzed one more time. Another text from Jorge. We need to talk. Please. I deleted it without responding. The time for talking was long past. Now was the time for consequences. The foreclosure notices just went out, Ramon announced, his voice crackling through my speakerphone. Both properties. They should receive them by tomorrow morning. I sat at my kitchen table, watching the sunrise with my morning coffee. How long until they have to vacate? 30 days. And that's being generous, considering the circumstances. Ella walked in, already dressed for work, and mouthed, Is that Ramon? I nodded. Any movement on their accounts? I asked. Frozen solid. Sloan tried to access her trust fund again yesterday. Got denied. Jorge's been calling his investment partners non-stop, but nobody's taking his calls anymore. Not since the SEC investigation made the news. My phone buzzed with a text notification. Ella picked it up and burst out laughing. Oh, you have to see this. Sloan's posting about toxic people and negative energy on Instagram. From the Azure Bay Resort? I asked. Not anymore. The geotag shows she's at some budget hotel now. Guess paradise got too expensive. Ramon cleared his throat. There's something else. A letter arrived at my office this morning. From Jorge. He wants me to give it to you. My stomach tightened. What does it say? Haven't opened it. It's addressed to you personally. Want me to bring it over? I looked at Ella, who nodded encouragingly. Okay, but come during lunch. I want both of you here when I read it. The morning crawled by. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to the letter. What could Jorge possibly have to say now? At noon, Ramon arrived with a cream-colored envelope in hand. It's heavy, he said, placing it on my kitchen counter. Open it, Ella urged, perching on a bar stool. I took a deep breath and tore open the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, several pages long. Dear Esme, I read aloud. By now you must know everything has fallen apart. The investments, the properties, all of it. I made a terrible mistake. Damn right you did, Ella muttered. I know I hurt you in the worst possible way, I continued reading. But Sloane, she's not who I thought she was. She's been lying to me, stealing from me. I should have known better. You were always the honest one, the reliable one. Ramon snorted. Now he remembers that? I know I have no right to ask anything of you, the letter went on, but please, can we meet? Just once? I need to explain everything. I've made such a mess of things, and I think you're the only one who can help me fix it. Fix it? Ella practically shouted. Is he serious? I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. He's desperate. The money's gone, Sloane's betrayed him, and his reputation is ruined. Are you going to meet him? Ramon asked carefully. Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a news alert. The SEC had expanded their investigation into Jorge's investment scheme. The headline included words like widespread fraud and potential criminal charges. Yes, I said finally. I'll meet him. What? Ella and Ramon exclaimed simultaneously. In a public place with both of you nearby. I held up my hand to stop their protests. Think about it. He's cornered, desperate. That makes him vulnerable. And vulnerable people tend to reveal things they shouldn't. Ramon's eyes lit up with understanding. You want to get him to incriminate himself? Exactly. Every word he says can be used against him later. I picked up my phone. Besides, I want to see his face when he realizes just how completely he's lost everything. You're scary sometimes, Ella said admiringly. You know that? I learned from the best. I smiled at Ramon. Can you set up the meeting? Somewhere public, lots of witnesses? Leave it to me. He pulled out his phone. And Esme, be careful. Desperate people can be dangerous. I know. I walked to my window, looking out at the city below. But so can I. Just then, another news alert popped up on my phone. The Azure Bay Resort was evicting Sloane for unpaid bills. The attached photo showed her arguing with hotel security in the lobby. Karma really is something, Ella mused, reading over my shoulder. It's not karma, I corrected her. It's consequences, and they're just beginning. I typed a quick response to Jorge's letter, agreeing to meet him in 2 days at a busy downtown cafe. As I hit send, I felt strangely calm. The pieces were all falling into place, exactly as planned. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from Sloane. Whatever Jorge tells you is a lie. I can explain everything. I deleted it without responding. Let them fight among themselves. Their desperation would only make what came next easier. The reckoning was about to begin. The cafe buzzed with lunchtime activity as I sat waiting, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold in front of me. Ella was positioned at a table across the room, pretending to work on her laptop. Ramon waited outside in his car, ready if needed. Jorge walked in exactly at noon, looking nothing like the confident man who'd left me weeks ago. His designer clothes had been replaced by wrinkled khakis and an untucked shirt. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. Esme, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. Thank you for meeting me. You have 15 minutes, I replied, checking my watch. Make them count. He ran his hands through his unkempt hair. Everything's falling apart. The investments, the properties. Sloane's been stealing from me. Can you believe that? Actually, I can. I took a sip of my cold coffee. It must be awful being betrayed by someone you trusted. He missed the irony completely. I've lost everything. The SEC is breathing down my neck. The banks have frozen all my accounts. He leaned forward. But you can help me. You understand finance better than anyone I know. Like I understood it when I warned you about those risky investments months ago? He flinched. I should have listened to you then. I see that now. No, I corrected him. You should have not stolen my money and run off with my sister. That was a mistake, he said quickly. I wasn't thinking clearly. Sloane, she manipulated me. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table, voice recorder running. Really? Tell me more about how my sister manipulated you into emptying our joint accounts. He didn't notice the trap. She said we could triple the money in 6 months. She had all these connections, these plans. But she was lying, Esme. She took half of what I took from you and hid it in separate accounts. That must have been shocking to discover. It was. And now she's threatening to go to the SEC herself if I don't give her more money. He laughed bitterly. Money I don't even have anymore. I leaned back, letting him talk himself deeper into trouble. Across the room, I saw Ella typing furiously, documenting every word. The thing is, Jorge continued, if you could just help me access some of the frozen assets, I could fix everything. Pay everyone back, make it right. Like you were going to make it right when you left me that divorce notice? He had the decency to look ashamed. I was wrong about everything. You were always the smart one, the stable one. I see that now. Interesting. I pulled out a folder and placed it on the table. Is that why you tried to hide these offshore accounts from the divorce proceedings? His face went pale. Where did you get those? I'm an auditor, Jorge. Finding hidden money is what I do. I stood up. And by the way, the SEC will be very interested in these records. Wait, he grabbed my arm. Please don't do this. I'll give you anything you want. I pulled free from his grip. You already took everything I had. But here's the funny thing. You gave me something in return. What's that? Clarity. I gathered my things. Oh, and one more thing. You might want to ask Sloane about the photos she's been sending to the FBI's fraud division. Turns out she's been building her own insurance policy against you for months. The color drained from his face. What photos? The ones showing you meeting with known fraudsters. The ones with dates and times that match perfectly with your suspicious wire transfers. I smiled. My sister may be many things, but she's not stupid. She's been playing you from the start. You're lying, he whispered, but his eyes showed doubt. Check your phone, I said, walking away. I'm sure the FBI will be in touch soon. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. 15 minutes are up, by the way. Goodbye, Jorge. Outside, Ramon was waiting with his car door open. How did it go? Better than expected. I handed him my phone. Got everything on record. He admitted to the theft, the fraud, everything. And the FBI photos? Ella asked, joining us. Was that true about Sloane? No, I smiled. But it will be by tonight. Ramon, can you send those surveillance photos we've been holding on to the FBI's tip line? With pleasure. As we drove away, I saw Jorge through the cafe window, frantically typing on his phone. By now, he'd be discovering that Sloane had blocked his number. You know what the best part is? I said to Ella. He still thinks he's the victim in all this. Not for long, she replied. Not after the FBI gets those photos. My phone buzzed with a text from Sloane. We need to talk. Now. I showed it to Ella, who grinned. Ready for round 2? More than ready, I replied. It's time to end this. Sloane looked nothing like the polished Instagram photos when she showed up at my door unannounced. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smudged, and her usual confidence replaced by desperate energy. You have to help me, she blurted out before I could speak. The FBI is asking questions, my accounts are frozen, and the hotel just kicked me out. That sounds like a personal problem, I replied, not inviting her in. I'm your sister. She tried to push past me, but I held my ground. Were you my sister when you ran off with my husband? She deflated slightly. That's complicated. Look, can I just come in, please? I can explain everything. I stepped aside, letting her enter. Ella sat at my kitchen counter, arms crossed, while Ramon stood by the window recording everything on his phone. Oh, Sloane faltered. I didn't realize you had company. They're here for my protection, I said coldly. You have 5 minutes. Protection? From me? I'm your little sister. She dropped her designer bag on the floor. Jorge manipulated me. He said he loved me, that you didn't understand him. Save it. I cut her off. I saw the bank records. You were stealing from him while he was stealing from me. Her face changed, Calculation replacing desperation. Okay, fine. Yes, I took some money, but he deserved it. He was planning to dump me anyway, once he got everything set up offshore. And that justifies betraying your own sister? You always had everything, she exploded. The perfect job, the perfect house, the perfect life. You don't know what it's like living in your shadow. Shadow? I laughed incredulously. You were mom and dad's favorite. They paid for your college, your car, your apartment. I worked for everything I have. Had, she corrected with a sneer. Everything you had. The room went silent. Even Ella inhaled sharply. You're right, I said quietly. Everything I had. But here's what you don't understand, Sloan. While you were busy taking my things, I was busy building a trap. What are you talking about? I nodded to Ramon, who pulled out his tablet. Show her. He turned the screen towards Sloan. On it were dozens of photos. Her secret meetings with Jorge, the offshore bank visits, the cash transfers, all meticulously documented with dates and times. How did you... she started. I'm an auditor, I reminded her. Finding evidence is what I do, and you two left quite a trail. Those photos mean nothing, she said, but her voice wavered. The FBI disagrees. They're especially interested in the ones showing you and Jorge meeting with known financial criminals. I stepped closer. By the way, how's that trust fund looking? Her face went pale. You wouldn't dare. The morality clause has already been triggered. The trustees are meeting next week to discuss your permanent removal as a beneficiary. You can't do this to me. She grabbed my arm. I'm family. I pulled free. Family doesn't steal from family, and now you get to learn what it really means to have nothing. I'll tell everyone what you did, she threatened. How you set us up, trapped us. Go ahead, Ramon spoke up. Tell them how you and Jorge committed federal crimes, and Esme simply gathered evidence. I'm sure the FBI would love to hear your version. Sloane's shoulders slumped. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Your 5 minutes are up, I said, opening the front door. Goodbye, Sloane. Please, she whispered. I have nowhere to go. You should have thought about that before you destroyed my life. I gestured to the door. I hear the downtown hostel has weekly rates. She picked up her bag, tears streaming down her face. You've changed, she said accusingly. No, I corrected her. I just stopped being your victim. After she left, Ella let out a long breath. That was intense. Send the recording to the FBI, I told Ramon, along with those photos we've been holding back. Already done, he replied, typing on his phone. They're particularly interested in the offshore account numbers she just inadvertently confirmed. My phone buzzed. A text from Jorge. What did you tell Sloane? She's hysterical. I deleted it without responding and turned to my friends. Thank you both. For everything. Are you okay? Ella asked softly. I walked to my window, watching Sloane's expensive car, bought with my money, pull away from the curb. You know what? I really am. I turned back to them. For the first time since this all started, I feel free. Free, Ella repeated. I like that. My phone buzzed one final time. A notification from the FBI. They wanted to schedule a formal interview about Jorge and Sloane's financial activities. I smiled. The endgame was finally here. The morning sun streamed through my office window as I finished typing the last blog post of my story. The cursor blinked at me, waiting for the final words. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Financial fraud ring. Busted. Multiple arrests made. The accompanying photo showed Jorge being led away in handcuffs, his designer suit replaced by a rumpled dress shirt. Did you see the news? Ella burst into my office, waving her phone. They got him, and guess who turned state's evidence? Sloane, I said, already knowing. She always was good at saving herself. The FBI agent called. Ramon added, walking in behind her. Said your evidence was instrumental in breaking the case. They found connections to 3 other fraud schemes. I minimized the news article and returned to my blog post. The cursor still blinked, waiting. What are you writing? Ella peered over my shoulder. My story, all of it, from the moment I found that bank statement to now. I gestured to the screen. I'm just trying to find the right ending. Why share it? Ramon asked, genuinely curious. Because somewhere out there, someone else is going through what I did. Feeling helpless, betrayed, lost. I turned to face them. They need to know they can fight back, legally, methodically, effectively. Speaking of fighting back, Ella grinned, pulling up another news article. Look who's trending. The headline read, "Socialite Sisters Fall from Grace, Trust Fund Revoked." Below was a picture of Sloane leaving a budget motel, trying to hide her face from photographers. The trustees made it official this morning, Ramon confirmed. The morality clause was ironclad. She's cut off completely. My phone lit up with a text from my mother. Just saw the news. We need to talk about your sister. Not today, I muttered, declining the call. You'll have to deal with them eventually, Ella said gently. I know, but right now I need to finish this. I turned back to my computer and began typing. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about justice, about standing up for yourself when the people closest to you try to tear you down, about using your skills and knowledge to right wrongs instead of letting them destroy you. My husband and sister thought they could take everything from me, my money, my dignity, my trust in others. But they forgot something crucial. They forgot who I am, an auditor, a professional, someone who knows that every transaction leaves a trail. Every lie creates a pattern, and every betrayal contains the seeds of its own destruction. To those reading this who've been betrayed, you're not powerless, you're not alone, and you're certainly not finished. Use your skills, trust your instincts, build your evidence. Justice may not come quickly, but it does come. As for me, I'm not the same person who found that bank statement all those weeks ago. I'm stronger, wiser, and finally completely free. I hit publish and sat back. Perfect, Ella whispered, squeezing my shoulder. Ramon's phone buzzed. The FBI wants to know if you'll consult on similar cases. Apparently your methods impressed them. I smiled. Tell them I'll think about it. What now? Ella asked. Now? I stood up and gathered my things. Now we celebrate. I'm thinking champagne on my patio. The one Jorge always complained was too small? Ella laughed. The very one. And afterward, I'm redecorating the whole house. My way this time. As we headed out, my phone buzzed one last time. A comment on my blog post. Thank you. I thought I was alone. You gave me hope. See? Ella pointed at the comment, already making a difference. Outside, the city stretched before us, bright and full of possibilities. My house keys jingled in my hand, the keys to a home that was truly mine now, free from lies and betrayal. You know what the best revenge is? I said as we walked to my car. What's that? Ramon asked. Living well and helping others do the same. We drove away, leaving behind the old story of betrayal and beginning a new one of strength, justice, and redemption. Not just for me, but for anyone else who needed to find their way back to themselves. The sun was setting as we raised our glasses on my too-small patio, which suddenly felt exactly right. To justice, Ramon proposed. To friendship, Ella added. I lifted my glass, watching the light catch the bubbles. To new beginnings, and somewhere in the city, my blog post continued to spread, carrying a message of hope to others who needed it most. You can fight back. You can win. You can rebuild. You just have to know how to play the long game.
I was just 6 when Mom passed away. My memories of her are like whispers, soft and fleeting. I remember her gentle touch and her warm smile. They said she was the kindest soul. But after she was gone, the warmth in our house faded like the last light of dusk. Dad didn't take long to fill the void she left. Enter Helen, my stepmother, with her sharp eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. She was like a winter chill, creeping into every corner of our lives. To Dad, she was sweetness personified, always the doting wife. But the moment we were alone, her mask would drop. Listen here, Emily, she'd hiss, her voice slicing through the silence. Don't think for a second that you're anything more than a burden. Your father might not see it, but I do. You're just excess baggage, a reminder of a past best forgotten. Her words stung, but I learned to keep my tears hidden. I couldn't let her see how deep her words cut. A year flew by, and the family dynamic shifted even more. Helen gave birth to Lily, and overnight, I became invisible. Dad, caught up in the joy of a new daughter, unwittingly handed the reins of my life over to Helen. It was like handing a fox the keys to the henhouse. She relished in making my life a living nightmare. Dad was hardly around, always buried in work or too tired to notice the tension. On the rare occasions he was present, Helen played the part of the perfect wife and mother, and I was just the ghost in the background. So, I learned to live in the shadows, my voice a mere echo in the vast emptiness of what used to be a home. Helen's reign was undisputed, her words the final say in a house that had once known the gentle guidance of my mother. And as the days turned to years, I found myself wondering if the warmth of a family was just a distant dream, forever out of reach in the cold reality I existed in. Living with Helen was like walking through a minefield, never knowing when the next explosion would occur. Meal times were a particular kind of torture. She knew exactly which dishes made my stomach turn, yet those were the ones she'd serve me, her eyes glinting with malice as she'd set the plate down. "Here, Emily, your dinner. Eat up, we can't have you wasting away," she'd say, a twisted smile on her lips as she served me the very thing she knew I despised. I'd sit there, the smell alone enough to make me nauseous. The few times I mustered the courage to push the plate away, Helen's theatrics would come into play. "John, look at her. Your daughter is turning into a princess, too good for the food I slaved over. What are we going to do with her?" she'd wail to my father, painting herself as the victim. Dad, ever the peacemaker, would sigh. "Emily, can't you just eat what's given to you? Your stepmother works hard to prepare these meals." But it wasn't just the food. Helen's cruelty extended to how I was presented to the world. My clothes were either a hodgepodge of mismatched colors and patterns or hand-me-downs so worn they were threadbare. I'd step out looking more like a scarecrow or a parrot, drawing snickers and sideways glances from my peers. "Emily, why do you dress like that? You look weird," the kids at school would jeer. I'd swallow the lump in my throat, my cheeks burning with shame. "It's all I have," I'd mumble, wishing I could just disappear. Back at home, Lily lived a starkly different life. She was the golden child, the center of Helen and Dad's world. Her wardrobe was a collection of the prettiest dresses, her meals always her favorites. She grew up with the world at her feet, and it showed in her attitude. Spoiled and petulant, she'd throw tantrums if things didn't go her way, and Helen would rush to soothe her, blaming me for her outbursts. "Emily, look what you did. You upset your sister," Helen would scold, even if I hadn't done a thing. And if Lily ever got caught doing something wrong, somehow, it would be twisted to be my fault. "Emily, I can't believe you do this," Dad would say, disappointment in his eyes, as Helen spun her tales, painting me as the instigator and Lily as the innocent. But despite the pain, the unfairness of it all, a small part of me held on to hope. Hope that one day, things would change. That one day, Dad would see through Helen's lies. That one day, I'd be able to leave this all behind and find a place where I belonged, a place where I was more than just the unwanted stepdaughter, more than just the shadow in the background of Lily's perfect life. Life under Helen's roof was a daily grind, a test of endurance. But amidst the gloom, a flicker of light appeared, so unexpected it almost felt like a dream. It happened one ordinary evening, the kind that usually passed in silence or with Helen's sharp words cutting through the air. I was in my room, lost in my books, the only escape I had from the dreariness of my existence, when Dad's voice broke through the quiet. "Emily, come down here. We need to talk," he called, his tone more serious than usual. Curiosity piqued, I hesitated for a moment, wondering what I might have done wrong this time. As I made my way downstairs, I found Dad sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of him. Helen was there too, her eyes wary, a frown creasing her forehead. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad cleared his throat, his eyes meeting mine. "Emily, I've been thinking. It's about time we discussed your future. You're graduating soon, and..." Helen cut in, her voice sharp. "Yes, Emily. Your father thinks it's time you stood on your own 2 feet. Isn't that right, John?" But Dad shook his head, silencing her with a look. What I'm trying to say is, your mother, God rest her soul, she left something for you. For your education. It's enough to get you through college. I stood there, stunned, the words barely sinking in. College? You mean, I can go to college? Helen scoffed. Oh, now she's interested. Thought you'd be too busy feeling sorry for yourself to care about your future. Dad's gaze hardened. Enough, Helen. This isn't about you. Emily, your mother wanted this for you. She set aside this money before she passed. It's yours, and I think it's what she would have wanted. The room spun around me. College. A chance to escape, to build a life away from the cold stares and harsh words. I felt a lump in my throat, a mix of gratitude and an overwhelming sense of what this meant. Thank you, Dad. I don't know what to say. I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Helen snorted. Well, don't get too excited. It's not a free ride. You'll have to work hard, prove that you're not just wasting your mother's hard-earned money. But her words, usually so cutting, couldn't pierce the bubble of hope that had formed around me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a path forward, a way out. The following weeks were a blur of applications, forms, and preparations. Helen's barbs continued, but they bounced off me, unable to puncture the shield of determination I had built. I was going to college, stepping into a future that was mine to shape. And as I packed my bags, ready to leave the house that had never truly felt like home, I looked back, not with sadness, but with a sense of closure. This was more than just leaving, it was the first step toward finding myself, toward healing the wounds of the past and building a life where I was more than just the unwanted stepdaughter, more than just a shadow in a cold, unloving home. Helen watched me with a smirk as I headed for the door. Don't think this is the end, Emily. Life's not that kind. You'll learn soon enough. I met her gaze, my resolve unshaken. Maybe. But at least I'll be learning, growing, and most importantly, living on my terms. With those final words, I stepped out, the weight of the past lifting with each step I took. The future was uncertain, daunting even, but it was mine, and that was all that mattered. Leaving home for college was like taking a deep breath after years underwater. I was off to study law in a city miles away from the stifling walls of my past. I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and relief as the bus pulled away, the familiar sights fading into the distance. Life in college was a whirlwind of lectures, libraries, and late-night study sessions. I threw myself into the law, finding solace in the clarity of statutes and the fairness of justice, so different from the life I'd known. Holidays would come, and I'd send my wishes back home, but the silence that returned was deafening. No happy birthday, no Merry Christmas, just the echo of my own voice in the void. Years slipped by, and my hard work paid off. Graduation day came, and I walked across that stage, not just with a degree in hand, but with the satisfaction of having done it on my own. I landed a job at a small law firm, throwing myself into the world of briefs and courtrooms. I was 25, standing on my own 2 feet, carving out my place in the world. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang one lazy Sunday afternoon. The screen flashed Dad, making my heart skip a beat. Hello? I answered, my voice cautious. Emily, it's your dad. I know it's been a while, and I'm sorry for that. I'm not doing too well, health-wise. And I've been thinking, maybe it's time to mend fences, you know? His voice was weaker than I remembered, laced with a regret that tugged at my heartstrings. Dad, of course, I want that too. How are you? What's wrong? The concern in my voice surprised even me. It's a long story, Em. I've got some health issues, and well, it made me realize, life's too short for grudges, or what have been. I miss you, kiddo. Hearing the word miss from him, after all these years, it did something to me. It was as if a small, locked-away part of my heart creaked open. I miss you too, Dad. I can come visit, see how you're doing. We can talk, try to start over. I found myself saying, the words spilling out before I could weigh them. That'd mean the world to me, Em. Really. The call ended with a promise to visit soon, leaving me in a whirlwind of emotions. For so long, I'd built up walls, prepared myself to go through life without my family. And now, with just a few words, those walls seemed less impenetrable. As I was packing my suitcases in my car, I realized that this wasn't just a journey back home. It was a journey into the unknown, a chance to heal old wounds, to bridge the gap that time and silence had widened. And for the first time in a long time, I found myself looking forward to what lay ahead. The drive back to my hometown felt longer than it actually was. Each mile closer to the house where I grew up made my heart race a little faster. I hadn't been back since I left for college, and the thought of facing them all again was daunting. Pulling into the driveway, I sat for a moment, gathering my thoughts. The house looked the same, yet different somehow, smaller and less intimidating than in my memories. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked up to the front door. Before I could even knock, it swung open, and there was Helen, her eyes scrutinizing me from head to toe. Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter. Back from the big city, huh? Still dressing like you're on a budget, I see, Helen sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. I felt the old familiar sting of her words, but I wasn't the same timid girl anymore. Clothes don't make a person, Helen. It's what's inside that matters, I replied, my voice steady. Her laugh was harsh, devoid of warmth. Look at you, all grown up and spouting wisdom. Come in then. Your father's been asking about you. As I stepped into the house, memories flooded back, each room a reminder of the years I'd spent under Helen's critical eye. I found Dad in the living room, a shadow of his former self, looking frail and tired. Dad, I said softly, approaching him. His eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of emotion, a mix of sadness and relief. Emily, you're here. I've been thinking about you, about everything. I wasn't there for you when you needed me most. I'm sorry, so sorry for that. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. It's okay, Dad. We can't change the past. What's important is that we're here now. He nodded, his hand reaching out weakly, and I took it, a silent acknowledgement of forgiveness and a tentative step toward healing. Helen watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. Well, this is touching. The perfect family reunion, she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. I chose to ignore her jab, focusing instead on Dad. How have you been, really? I asked, concern lacing my words. It's been tough, Emily. The illness, it takes a lot out of me. But having you here, it means more than you know, he replied, his voice weak but genuine. Behind Helen, I noticed Lily peeking in, her expression curious. She was no longer the little girl I remembered, but an 18-year-old young woman, looking unsure of where she fit into this unexpected family gathering. Lily, come here. It's been a long time, I said, offering her a small smile. She hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. Hi, Emily. You look different, she said, her tone cautious, but not unkind. Different good, I hope, I replied, trying to break the ice. She gave a small, uncertain smile. Yeah, different good. The conversation was awkward, the years of distance and Helen's influence hanging heavily between us. But it was a start, a small crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. In the days that followed, I found a small apartment nearby and settled into a routine of visiting Dad, trying to make up for lost time. Our talks were sometimes painful, often healing, a mix of regret and rediscovery. Helen's presence was a constant challenge, her remarks a reminder of the past. But the change in Dad, the softening of Lily, it gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to be a family again, flawed and fractured, but together in our own way. Life in my hometown was settling into a rhythm, a delicate balance between the past and the present. Dad's health was a constant worry, but our newfound bond brought a sense of peace that had been missing for years. However, the calm was soon to be disrupted in a way I never anticipated. One evening, as I was leaving Dad's house, Helen cornered me in the hallway, her eyes glinting with an unfamiliar intensity. Emily, your father wants to talk about something important. Something about his will. You should be there, she said, her voice low and urgent. Surprised by her seriousness, I nodded. Okay, Helen. Let's see what Dad has to say. We gathered in the living room, the air thick with anticipation. Dad looked more somber than usual, a stack of papers on the table in front of him. Lily sat quietly, her eyes darting between Dad and me. Emily, Lily, I've been doing a lot of thinking. Life's thrown us some curveballs, and it's made me realize how important it is to put things in order. Dad began, his voice steady but strained. Helen interjected, her tone sharp. John, just get to the point. What are you trying to say? Dad took a deep breath. I've decided to revise my will. Emily, I've not been fair to you, not for a long time. I want to make it right. I'm leaving you a portion of my estate, $300,000. It's what your mother would have wanted. The room went silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Helen's face turned a shade paler, her lips pressed into a thin line. You can't be serious, John. Emily's been gone for years, and now she just waltzes back in and you're giving her part of our family's estate? What about Lily? Helen's voice was sharp, her words slicing through the tension. Dad remained firm. It's my decision, Helen. Emily is my daughter, and she deserves this. It's long overdue. I was speechless, the emotion swirling inside me too complex to untangle. Gratitude, guilt, and a sense of vindication all mixed together. Lily finally spoke up, her voice small but clear. Dad, it's your choice. I just want us to be a family again. That's more important than any will. Helen shot her a withering look, but said nothing. The tide had shifted, the dynamics of our family changing in ways I never imagined. Weeks turned into a tentative dance of civility in the house. I'd drop by often, each visit less tense than the last, almost normal. Helen, to my surprise, was behaving decently, her usual sharp tongue seemingly dulled. One sunny afternoon, as I was leaving Dad's place, Helen approached me, a hint of unease in her eyes. Emily, I hate to ask, but can I borrow your car? Mine's broken down, and I have an important errand. I wouldn't bother you otherwise, she said, her voice almost too casual. I hesitated, the keys to my car heavy in my pocket. But seeing her seemingly genuine distress, I relented. Sure, Helen. Just be careful, all right? I said, handing her the keys. She offered a rare smile. Thank you, Emily. You're a lifesaver. I left by taxi, a nagging unease in the pit of my stomach. The next day, I returned to pick up my car, expecting to find it parked outside. But the space was empty. Confusion turned to concern as I hurried inside. Helen, where's my car? It's not outside, I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She looked up from her magazine, her expression one of confusion. What do you mean? It should be right out front. You gave me the keys, remember? Dad, seated at the table, chimed in, his brow furrowed. Lily took the car out early this morning. Didn't she tell you, Helen? Helen's face went pale. No, she didn't. Why would she take your car, Emily? She knows it's not hers to use. Before I could respond, my phone rang, the sound slicing through the tension. It was the local police. My heart sank as the officer on the line explained that my car had been involved in an accident. Lily was driving, and the brakes had failed. She was in the hospital. The room spun as I relayed the news. Helen let out a gasp, clutching her chest as she staggered, then collapsed into a chair. Oh God, what have I done? She murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Dad and I exchanged a look of confusion and horror. Helen, what are you talking about? What have you done? I demanded, my voice rising with panic. When she finally composed herself, her words sent chills down my spine. I tampered with the brakes, thinking thinking it would be you driving, not Lily. Oh God, I was so angry about the will, about everything. I never meant for Lily to get hurt. The confession hit like a punch to the gut. Disbelief, rage, and shock coursed through me as Dad called the police, his hands shaking. The room, once a place of tense reconciliation, was now a scene of betrayal and devastation. As the reality of Helen's actions sank in, the world as I knew it crumbled. The fragile peace we'd built, the family we'd tried to mend, it was all shattered by a single, unthinkable act. And as we waited for the police to arrive, the weight of what had happened, of what could have happened, was suffocating. I was torn between concern for Lily, lying in a hospital bed because of a malicious act meant for me, and the betrayal by Helen, a woman who had proven she was capable of the unimaginable. The road to healing and forgiveness had been hard enough, but now, it felt impossible. The police arrived, their arrival a stark reminder of how quickly life can spiral out of control. Helen was taken away, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. Dad and I sat in silence, the weight of her confession hanging heavy between us. I can't believe she would do something like this. To her own daughter. Dad's voice broke, the betrayal cutting him deeper than any illness ever could. I reached out, taking his hand. Dad, we need to be strong, for Lily. She needs us now more than ever. He nodded, his eyes moist with unshed tears. You're right, Emily. It's just, all these years, I never knew the person I was sharing my life with. The following days were a blur of hospital visits and legal procedures for divorce. Lily was stable, but the road to recovery was going to be long. Seeing her in that hospital bed, so fragile, so innocent, it stirred a protectiveness in me I didn't know I had. One evening, as we sat by her bedside, Lily's voice, weak but clear, broke the silence. Emily. I'm sorry. For everything. I never knew. I never thought. I squeezed her hand gently. Lily, it's not your fault. You didn't know. We're going to get through this, together. Dad, who had been a silent presence, spoke up. Both of you, you're my girls. What Helen did, it's unforgivable. But we're a family, and we're going to heal, move forward. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, life began to find a new rhythm. Helen's trial was the talk of the town, but within the walls of our home, we focused on healing, on rebuilding the broken bonds. Lily's recovery was a miracle in itself. Each small step, each smile, was a victory, a testament to her strength. And as she grew stronger, so did the bond between us. Dad, I've been thinking, I said one evening as we sat in the living room, a semblance of peace settling around us. Maybe it's time for a fresh start. A new beginning for all of us. Dad looked at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're right, Emily. We've been given a second chance, and we shouldn't waste it. Let's leave the past where it belongs, and build a new future, for us, for Lily. And so we did. We sold the old house, the place of so many painful memories, and found a new home, a place where the shadows of the past couldn't reach us. It wasn't easy, starting over, but with each other, we found the strength to move forward, to create a new story, one filled with hope and love. I remember the day I met Ethan like it was yesterday. It was at one of those high society parties where everyone pretends to care about the hors d'oeuvres, but really just shows up for the free booze and gossip. I was there, standing awkwardly by the buffet, not touching a thing. That's me, Laura, the girl who's deadly allergic to peanuts. It's a pain, but you get used to the drill. Don't eat anything you didn't make yourself. Ethan was hard to miss, the life of the party, cracking jokes and charming everyone within a 10-foot radius. I was trying my best to blend into the wallpaper when he sauntered over, plate in hand, and raised an eyebrow at my empty hands. Hey, I'm Ethan. You're not eating anything. What's up with that? He asked, stuffing a mini quiche into his mouth. I shrugged, feeling a bit self-conscious. I'm Laura. It's nothing exciting, just a peanut allergy. Makes these kind of things a bit of a minefield. He chuckled. Peanut allergy, huh? So, if I wanted to keep you away, I'd just have to throw Snickers bars at you? I couldn't help but laugh. Exactly, but please don't. I prefer my parties anaphylaxis-free. Deal. He grinned. But seriously, that sucks. Can't be easy navigating food minefields at parties. It's not the best, but you get used to it. Just gotta keep an eye out and ask a lot of questions. Ethan nodded, looking genuinely interested, which was a nice change. Sounds like a full-time job. Hey, if you ever need a taste tester or food checker, I'm your guy. No peanuts will get past me. The conversation flowed effortlessly from there. Ethan was easy to talk to, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel so out of place. We talked about everything and nothing, work, music, the ridiculousness of adulting. It felt like we'd known each other for years. As the evening wound down, Ethan said, I had a great time tonight, Laura. I mean, not just the party, but talking to you. You're different, you know? In a good way. I felt my cheeks warm up. Thanks, Ethan. I had a great time too. It's not often I meet someone who doesn't run away screaming after the whole I could die from peanuts spiel. He laughed. Well, I'm not most people. Plus, I like a little danger. Add spice to life, right? I rolled my eyes, but couldn't hide my smile. Sure, if by spice you mean the constant threat of anaphylactic shock. Exactly, keeps things interesting. Listen, I'd really like to see you again. Maybe in a less life-threatening setting? I hesitated for a split second. Ethan was great, but inviting someone into the allergy-laden mess that was my life? That was a big step. But looking into his earnest, slightly mischievous eyes, I felt a pull I couldn't ignore. Yeah, I'd like that, I said, surprising myself. Great. It's a date then. I'll text you. And I promise, no peanut surprises. As he walked away, I couldn't help but feel like maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something special. Little did I know how right, and how wrong, I would be. Ethan and I hit it off like fireworks on the 4th of July. It was one of those romances you hear about but never really believe could happen. I was cautious at first, but with Ethan, it felt like throwing caution to the wind wasn't just okay, it was the only way to go. We started seeing each other nonstop. Our dates weren't your typical dinner and a movie deal. No, Ethan was all about the experience. We'd find ourselves at a hole-in-the-wall jazz club one night and playing mini-golf like a couple of kids the next. He had a way of making the mundane feel magical. One breezy evening, we were walking along the river, the city lights reflecting like stars on the water. Ethan stopped and looked at me, his eyes serious. Laura, I gotta tell you something. I'm not into playing games or beating around the bush. I'm crazy about you. It's like you've got this realness about you. It's refreshing. And I want us, to be something more. His words hit me like a lightning bolt. I was feeling it too, the intensity, the connection, but hearing him say it out loud, it made it real. Ethan, I feel the same way. I was scared, you know? But with you, it's different. It feels right. He grinned, that lopsided grin that made my heart do somersaults. Well, then. Guess that settles it. You and me, we're doing this. For real. And we did. It wasn't long before we were inseparable. Meeting his friends, meeting his family, it all happened in a blur. Ethan was a big deal at his company, head of his department, and he had this air about him like he could conquer the world if he wanted to. And me? I was just an accountant, living a quiet life until he stormed in like a hurricane. One night, over a quiet dinner at his place, Ethan brought up the future. It was a simple conversation, but it changed everything. Laura, you know I've got this job, this career. But it's not my whole world. You are. I've been thinking, what if you didn't have to work? What if you could just focus on I don't know, starting a family or whatever you want. I can support us. The idea was crazy. Leave my job? Become a housewife? But the way he said it, like it was the most natural thing in the world, it made me consider it. Ethan, that's a big step. But, starting a family, it's something I've always wanted. You're sure about this? He took my hand, his gaze steady and sure. I've never been sure about anything. I want this life, our life, to be about us, not about work or stress. I want to make this happen, for you, for us. And just like that, I found myself saying yes. Yes to leaving my job, yes to this new life with Ethan, yes to a future that was both terrifying and exhilarating. After the wedding, life with Ethan was a mix of highs and lows. He never really cut ties with his circle of friends, and I found myself tagging along to their endless parties. At one of these gatherings, we bumped into this pretty girl, Natalie, who turned out to be the CEO's daughter of the company where Ethan worked. I noticed the way they interacted, all smiles and subtle touches. They even danced together, laughing and chatting like old pals. It rubbed me the wrong way, seeing them so cozy. A pang of jealousy hit me hard, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. But that was just the beginning. The real trouble started one ordinary morning in our kitchen, the kind of morning that's supposed to be full of simple joys and shared dreams. Ethan, I'm pregnant, I announced, my heart racing with a mix of nerves and excitement. He froze, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. Finally, he set the cup down and faced me, his expression unreadable. Laura, you sure about this? I mean, we talked family and all, but now? Is now good timing? His words felt like a slap. What do you mean, good timing? Ethan, this is our plan, remember? Our family starting? He sighed, a sound that carried weight, weariness. I know it is. But plans and reality, they ain't always buddies. We gotta think this through, Laura. We ain't ready, not really. A lump formed in my throat. Not ready? But you said, you wanted this, to take care of us. What's changed? He avoided my gaze, shifting uncomfortably. Things change, Laura. Just being real here. Maybe, we need to consider all our options. Before we jump into anything. Options? Like not having this baby? I could hardly believe the words coming out of my mouth. He didn't meet my eyes. Maybe. I don't know. Let's just think on it, okay? After that, everything started to unravel. Ethan pulled away, shutting me out. Our home felt more like a war zone than a haven. Minor spats turned into major blowouts, our words cutting deep. One night, Ethan stumbled in late, the weight of the world seemingly on his shoulders. Another late night? I tried to keep it cool, neutral. Yeah, work, he grumbled, not bothering to shed his coat. Something you wouldn't get. That stung. Wouldn't get? What's that supposed to mean, Ethan? He gave a dismissive shrug. Means I'm out there working my butt off while you're here playing housewife. It's different, Laura. You just don't see it. My face heated up with anger. Playing housewife? That's what you think I'm doing? Carrying our kid, keeping our home, that's just a game to you? He didn't reply, just poured himself a drink and stared into nothing, 1,000 miles away. It was like living with a ghost. The man I married, the one who promised to stand by me, had vanished, leaving this cold, distant shell in his place. The tension between Ethan and me was thick enough to cut with a knife, but life didn't stop for our troubles. We kept up appearances, attending parties like everything was normal. One of those evenings sticks in my mind like a thorn. We were at another one of Ethan's high-flying gatherings. The room was buzzing with chatter, laughter, and clinking glasses. I was picking at my food, careful as ever, when Natalie, the CEO's daughter, breezed in like she owned the place. The air shifted as she made her way through the crowd, and I felt Ethan tense up beside me. Hey, Ethan, Laura. Natalie greeted us, her voice smooth as silk. Glad you could make it. Ethan managed a tight smile. Wouldn't miss it, Natalie. You know that. I nodded, trying to keep my face neutral. Nice to see you, Natalie. She turned her gaze on me, sharp and calculating. Laura, I heard about your little food issue. Must be tough, always watching what you eat. I stiffened, not liking the way she said food issue. It's an allergy, Natalie. And yeah, it's a bit of a hassle. She laughed, a sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, I bet. But hey, at least it keeps you slim, right? Every cloud and all that. I forced a smile, feeling Ethan's eyes on me. Sure, something like that. The evening dragged on. Ethan was pulled away by some colleagues, leaving me with Natalie. She was all smiles and niceties, but there was something off about her. She kept probing, asking about my allergy, how I manage, what would happen if I ate peanuts. I answered her questions, but with each word, I felt more exposed, like she was filing away my answers for something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Then, out of the blue, she dropped a bombshell. So, Laura, I've been meaning to ask. How are things with Ethan? You two seem, I don't know, a bit off lately. Trouble in paradise? I was taken aback. This was none of her business. Ethan and I are fine, Natalie. Every couple has their ups and downs. She nodded, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't read. Of course, of course. Just making conversation. You know how these parties get, all small talk and gossip. I didn't like the way she said gossip. It felt like a warning, a signal that my and Ethan's problems might be more public than I thought. The night ended with a sour taste in my mouth. As we drove home, Ethan was quiet, lost in thought. I wanted to ask him about Natalie, about what's going on with us, but the words wouldn't come. It was like we were strangers, sharing a space but nothing else. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized how isolated I felt. It wasn't just Ethan's distance, it was the feeling that there were eyes on us, whispers behind our backs. The gathering hadn't just been disturbing because of Natalie's probing questions. It was a wake-up call, a realization that our private life might not be so private after all. The 5th month of my pregnancy was a roller coaster. Sleepless nights, restless days. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the bombshell that was about to drop. It was one of those sleepless nights. Tossing and turning, the baby bump making it impossible to get comfortable. I gave up on sleep and shuffled to the kitchen for some water, the house silent except for the creaks and groans of the old floorboards. But then, a voice drifted from the living room. Ethan's voice, hushed but intense. I froze, my heart thumping in my chest. This wasn't just any late-night call. This was something else. I love you, too. Ethan's voice floated through the darkness, coated in sweetness that made my stomach churn. Don't worry, she's out. Sleeps like a log these days. We can talk. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't happening. But it was, and it got worse. A woman's voice responded, clear and unmistakable. Natalie's voice. Remember, Ethan, it has to look like an accident. The peanut thing. Just swap her morning pasta with the one we bought. Ethan's reply was a punch to the gut. I know. It'll be soon. Can't stand another day with her. And that kid? We'll be free soon, Nat. I stood there, my whole world crumbling. This wasn't a nightmare, it was real. My husband, plotting with his mistress to kill me, to make it look like an accident. A cold fear gripped me, but I wouldn't let it paralyze me. Silently, I retreated to the bedroom, my mind a whirlwind of fear and fury. I wasn't going to play the victim in this twisted game. I needed evidence, something concrete to nail him and that viper, Natalie. As soon as Ethan left the next morning, I sprang into action. Tore through his stuff like a woman on a mission. And there it was, hiding in plain sight, the jar of sweet pasta, laced with peanuts, a death sentence for the unsuspecting. But I wasn't unsuspecting. Not anymore. I swapped that jar for a twin, identical in every way but one. This one was safe, filled with an imitation flavor that wouldn't hurt a fly. Let him think he had the upper hand. Let him believe his plan was foolproof. The stage was set, the players in place. Ethan's twisted plot was about to unravel, and I was the one pulling the strings. As I lay in bed that night, the recording device safely hidden, I knew the morning would bring the final act of this dark drama. The morning light crept through the curtains, casting a calm over the kitchen that was in stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Ethan was up early, humming some tune, as he busied himself with making breakfast. The smell of toasted bread filled the air, but my stomach churned with nerves, not hunger. "Here you go, Laura. Made your favorite pasta sandwiches," he said, pushing the plate towards me, his eyes glued to my face, waiting for the show to start. I took a bite, locking eyes with him, knowing this was it. "Ethan, I can't breathe," I choked out, clutching my throat, my heart racing not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the trap I'd set. His reaction was bone-chilling. Laughter, cold and cruel, spilled out of him. "Can't breathe? Well, that's the point, Laura. Thought you'd have figured it out by now. It's peanut butter, darling. Your ticket out of my life." I kept up the act, my eyes wide with feigned panic. "Why, Ethan? Why are you doing this?" He leaned in, a twisted smile on his lips. "Why?" "Because you're in the way, Laura. You and the kid. I've got plans with Natalie, big plans. And I don't need a divorce dragging me down, slicing my fortune in two, or a kid eating into my cash. This way, it's cleaner, simpler." His words hit like a slap, but I was ready. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. "You're sick, Ethan. You won't get away with this." He laughed, that same cold sound, and shrugged on his coat. "I already have, Laura. By the time anyone figures it out, I'll be long gone, an alibi solid as a rock. Goodbye, Laura." The door clicked shut behind him, and I sprang into action. I stopped the act, my breathing normal, my mind razor-sharp. The recording device had captured every word, every confession. I dialed the police, my voice steady. "I'd like to report an attempted murder. My husband, he's tried to poison me because of my allergy." The operator's voice was calm, professional. "Ma'am, are you safe now? Can you tell me your location?" "Yes, I'm safe, he's left for work. But I have proof, a recording of his plan, of him admitting it, and the peanut paste he used." "Stay where you are, we're sending officers right away. Keep the recording safe, it's crucial evidence." As I hung up, the reality of what I'd done, what I'd escaped, washed over me. I'd walked through the fire, faced down the man I once loved, and come out the other side. It was over for Ethan, his web of lies unraveled by his own arrogance. And as the police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer with every heartbeat, I knew this was just the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter, a fresh start for me and my child, built on truth, courage, and a will of iron. The game was over, and I, not Ethan, was the one left standing. The courtroom was a cold, harsh place, but on that day, it felt like the stage of justice. There, Ethan and his mistress, Natalie, faced the music, their twisted plot laid bare for all to see. They tried to dodge the blame, hurling accusations at each other like desperate animals caught in a trap. But their words fell on deaf ears. The judge saw right through their lies, and the gavel came down hard. I sat there, watching them squirm, a mix of relief and disbelief churning inside me. My sister Marie squeezed my hand, her presence a silent pillar of strength. "Can you believe this, Laura?" she whispered, her voice a mix of disgust and satisfaction. "They're actually trying to outdo each other in being the worst." I nodded, my gaze fixed on Ethan. "Yeah, I can believe it. It's all they know, Marie. Lies, deceit, and now, finally, they're reaping what they sowed." The judge's voice cut through the tension, clear and resolute. Ethan and Natalie, you have been found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence is overwhelming, and your actions, despicable. This court sentences you to serve your 3-year prison term, a fate you brought upon yourselves. But that wasn't all. The judge turned his gaze to me, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Furthermore, the court orders Ethan to compensate Laura in the amount of $400,000 for the emotional and psychological damage inflicted upon her. Marie let out a low whistle, her eyes wide. Did you hear that, Laura? $400,000. That's justice, right there. I nodded, a weight lifting off my shoulders. It's more than justice, Marie. It's a new start, a chance to build something good from the ruins Ethan left behind. But justice had more in store. Natalie's wealthy parents, desperate to save face, coughed up half of the compensation themselves. Ethan had no choice but to give up the house, the walls that had witnessed so much pain now a symbol of my newfound freedom. As we left the courtroom, the reality of it all began to sink in. The nightmare was over. Ethan and Natalie were behind bars, their poisonous plot nothing but a bad memory. Marie wrapped an arm around me as we stepped into the light of a new day. You did it, Laura. You stood up to him, and you won. How does it feel? I took a deep breath, the air tasting sweeter, the sky a deeper shade of blue. It feels like a second chance, Marie. A chance to give this baby a good life, a peaceful home. A chance to heal, to grow, to live without fear. As the dust settled on the tumultuous storm that was my past, the world seemed to take on a softer hue. I sat on the porch of the house that once felt like a prison, but now was a sanctuary, a symbol of my newfound strength. Marie dropped by, her visits a constant in the ever-changing tapestry of my life. She plopped down beside me, her gaze taking in the horizon. Look at you, Laura. Sitting here, queen of your castle. Who would have thought, huh? Marie's voice was a mix of wonder and pride. I chuckled, the sound mingling with the gentle breeze. Queen of the castle, huh? More like guardian of my own peace. It's been a ride, Marie. One I never want to take again. Marie nudged me, her smile easy and comforting. But you made it, sis. Through all the darkness, the fear. You're here, you're strong, and you're free. I nodded, my heart a steady drum of quiet resolve. Free and ready. Ready to face whatever comes next. It's funny, you know. I used to think strength was about being unbreakable. But it's not that, is it? It's about being able to break and then put yourself back together, piece by piece. Marie's hand found mine, a silent vow of sisterhood. That's the truth. You're the toughest person I know, Laura. Not because you didn't break, but because you did, and here you are, stronger and more badass than ever. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It felt like nature's own way of applauding, of acknowledging the journey I'd been on. You know what the best part is, Marie? I said, my eyes reflecting the fiery sky. The best part is knowing that I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing it for this little one too. My hand rested on my belly, the life within a constant reminder of hope, of future. Marie squeezed my hand, her voice soft but fierce. That kid's got one hell of a mom. A warrior, a protector, a survivor. Ethan tried to write your story, but you grabbed that pen and wrote your own damn masterpiece. We sat there, two sisters, two warriors, watching the day give way to night. The darkness didn't scare me anymore. It was just a curtain, and behind it, the promise of a new day, a new chapter. I used to think life was pretty straightforward. You work hard, find someone you love, and build a life together. At least, that's how I saw it when I first met Michael. He was charming, had a good job, and seemed to have his life in order. We clicked instantly, and before I knew it, we were married. He was the kind of guy who had a plan for everything. The wedding, the house, our future, it was like he had it all mapped out. I guess I got caught up in it all, thinking I'd hit the jackpot. "Susan, love, you don't need to work anymore," Michael said to me, shortly after our honeymoon. "I've got us covered. You can focus on the house, and soon, we'll start our family. Won't that be wonderful?" It sounded nice at the time. No more waking up early for the daily grind, no more dealing with office politics. Just a peaceful life at home, taking care of the man I loved and our future kids. So, I agreed. I quit my job at the trading company, a job I actually loved, to become a full-time housewife. But as days turned into months, and months into years, the picture Michael painted started to show its true colors. "Susan, is it really that hard to keep the house tidy?" Michael's voice would boom as he walked through the door, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. "And dinner? I hope it's something decent today." "I'm tired of the same old stuff." I tried, God knows I tried. I kept the house spotless, learned new recipes, did everything I could to be the wife Michael wanted. But it was never enough. "No, thank you, no, it's delicious," or "You've outdone yourself." Nothing. It was like living with a ticking time bomb, never knowing what would set him off. The worst part? The silence. The absence of the pitter-patter of little feet, the laughter of a child, our child. It was a void, a constant reminder of what Michael considered my biggest failure. 3 years, Susan. 3 years and not even a sign of a baby. Do you know how embarrassing that is for me? Everyone at work is asking, and what do I say? That my wife can't do the one thing she's supposed to? His words would cut deeper than any knife. It wasn't like we hadn't tried. Doctor's appointments, tests, the works. But nothing. And instead of support, I got blame. As if it was my fault. As if I wanted this emptiness inside me, this feeling of being less than a woman. And then there were the gatherings. Michael loved showing off our home to his colleagues. Loved playing the big man in front of his friends. And I was reduced to a server, invisible yet scrutinized, bringing in drinks and food, trying to be the perfect hostess while my insides twisted with every laugh, every shared look between Michael and her, Sarah, his star colleague. "Susan, make sure you don't embarrass me tonight. And keep an eye on Sarah, she likes her drinks a certain way," Michael would say, his eyes never meeting mine, always fixed on something, or someone, far more important. It was a life, sure. But it was a life unraveling, thread by thread, until I felt like I was nothing more than a shadow in my own home, a ghost of the woman I once was. The days began to blur, each one a mirror of the last. Wake up, clean, cook, try to dodge Michael's sharp comments, then sleep, and repeat. It was like living in a loop, a never-ending cycle of chores and criticisms. The house that was supposed to be a home felt more like a prison, and I, its unwilling inmate. "Susan, are you even listening?" Michael's voice snapped me out of my thoughts one evening. I looked up to see him glaring at me, a crease of annoyance on his forehead. I said, "The Hendersons are coming over for dinner tomorrow. Make sure everything is perfect. I won't have you embarrassing me in front of my boss." I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, Michael. I'll take care of it." It was always about keeping up appearances, making sure everyone else saw the perfect picture, even if the frame was cracking at the edges. The next day was a flurry of activity. Cleaning, polishing, cooking, the house had to be spotless, the food nothing short of exquisite. It was exhausting, but I had learned long ago that it was better to just do it than to face Michael's wrath. The Hendersons arrived, all smiles and pleasantries. I played the part, the dutiful wife, serving and smiling, but inside, I was screaming. Screaming for a way out, for a moment of peace, for a life that felt like mine. After they left, Michael was in high spirits, the evening a success in his eyes. "See, Susan? When you actually try, things go well. Keep this up, and maybe there won't be as much to complain about." His words stung, but I bit back the tears. Crying never helped, it only made things worse. So, I cleaned up, washing the dishes as the weight of Michael's expectations and my own helplessness settled on my shoulders like a lead cloak. The next morning, I woke up feeling off. My head was spinning, and my stomach churned. I brushed it off, thinking it was just exhaustion or maybe something I ate. But when it happened again the next day, and the day after, I couldn't ignore it anymore. "Michael, I think I need to see a doctor," I said one morning, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've been feeling really sick lately, and it's not getting better." He barely looked up from his phone. "What now, Susan? Can't you handle a simple stomach bug?" "Fine, go see a doctor if you must, but make sure it's quick. You know we have plans this weekend." The doctor's appointment was a blur. Tests were run, questions asked, and then the wait. The wait that felt like an eternity. And then, the news I never expected, the news that changed everything. "Congratulations, Mrs. Taylor, you're pregnant," the doctor said, her smile warm and genuine. Pregnant. The word echoed in my mind, a beacon of hope in the fog of my life. I was going to be a mother. A mix of joy and fear washed over me. Joy for the life growing inside me, and fear for how Michael would react. I rushed home, the news burning a hole in my pocket. "Michael," I said, bursting through the door, my heart racing. "I have something to tell you. We're going to have a baby." He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "A baby, huh?" he said, his voice flat. "Well, don't expect this to change anything, Susan. Pregnant or not, you still have your responsibilities here." His words hit me like a bucket of cold water. This was supposed to be a moment of happiness, of shared dreams coming true. Instead, it was just another cold reminder of the life I was trapped in. With the pregnancy confirmed, life took on a strange new rhythm. My body was changing, reacting in ways I had never anticipated. Morning sickness became my constant, unwelcome companion, making the already tough days feel endless. "Susan, what's wrong with you these days? You're moving like a snail," Michael barked one evening as I struggled to keep up with the household chores, my body heavy and my mind foggy from exhaustion. "I'm just tired, Michael. The doctor said it's normal during the first trimester," I replied, trying to mask the nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. "Normal? There's nothing normal about slacking off. You wanted this baby, now deal with it. But don't let this house turn into a mess," he retorted, his voice void of understanding or empathy. The harshness in his words stung, but it was nothing new. I had learned to swallow the pain, to keep my head down and carry on. But inside, a fierce protective instinct was growing. This baby, my baby, was depending on me, and I wouldn't let Michael's coldness dim the light of hope that was slowly, tentatively, beginning to grow within me. One evening, as I was setting the table for one of Michael's dinner parties, the room started spinning. The clatter of the plates and the murmur of conversation faded into a distant hum as everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the couch, Michael standing over me, his expression a mix of annoyance and concern. "What the hell, Susan? You're making a scene in front of my guests. Get up and get yourself together," he hissed, his words laced with embarrassment rather than worry. I think I fainted," I muttered, my voice weak, my body trembling. "Fainted? Don't be dramatic. Just get up and finish dinner. And try not to embarrass me any further," he snapped, turning away to rejoin his colleagues as if nothing had happened. The following day, after another round of nausea and dizziness, I knew I couldn't ignore my body's signals any longer. "Michael, I need to see the doctor again. Something's not right," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "Again? What now, Susan?" "You're pregnant, not incapacitated. Handle it," he replied, barely looking up from his phone. But this time I didn't back down. "No, Michael. I'm going. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about our baby, and I won't take any risks," I said, the protective fire within me burning brighter, stronger. The doctor's visit confirmed my fears. "You need to rest, Mrs. Taylor. Your body is telling you it's time to slow down. The stress and physical strain could be dangerous for you and the baby, the doctor warned, her words echoing my own thoughts. Armed with the doctor's advice, I returned home, ready to confront Michael, ready to fight for the well-being of our child. Michael, we need to talk. The doctor said I need to rest more, that the stress and the work around the house could be dangerous for the baby, I said, my resolve unwavering. Rest? Who's going to take care of everything then, Susan? You expect me to start doing your job now, he scoffed, his tone dismissive, his eyes cold. No, I don't expect you to do anything. But I won't risk our baby's health. I won't. I need to go to my parents, I replied, the words pouring out, fueled by a newfound strength and the fierce love for the tiny life growing inside me. The conversation was far from easy, the resistance from Michael palpable. But the faint hope that had started this journey was no longer faint. This baby, my baby, was going to have a chance at a life filled with love and warmth, no matter what it took. The days at my parents' place were like a balm to my bruised soul. Away from Michael's cold glares and constant criticisms, I started to breathe a little easier, to feel a bit more like the Susan I used to be before my life became a series of chores and reprimands. But peace has a way of being fragile, especially when you're carrying around a secret as big as mine. I was 8 months pregnant, my belly a constant reminder of the life I left behind, and the life that was growing inside me. And then, that one call shattered the fragile peace I'd been clinging to. Susan, you gotta hear this. My friend Lisa's voice was urgent, a low whisper on the other end of the line. I saw Michael yesterday. And guess what? He wasn't alone. That woman from his office, Sarah, it's like they're a couple, Susan. My heart sank, a cold dread settling in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't just the betrayal, the blatant disrespect. It was the realization that the man I had married, the man I had built a life with, saw me as nothing more than a convenience, easily discarded, easily replaced. Are you sure, Lisa? It's Michael. My Michael, I managed to say, my voice a mere whisper, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Susan, I wouldn't tell you this if I wasn't 100%. I'm so sorry, girl. But you deserve better, you and your baby. Lisa's voice was firm, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling inside me. I hung up, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, hurt, disbelief. But more than anything, a fierce determination to not let this be the end of my story. Mom, Dad, we need to talk, I said later that day, my parents sitting across from me in the living room, worry etching their faces at the seriousness in my voice. What's wrong, honey? My mom asked, her eyes searching mine, looking for a clue, a hint of what was tearing me apart inside. It's Michael. He's been seeing someone else. Someone from his office, I said, the words coming out in a rush, the truth laying bare the wound that was still fresh, still bleeding. My dad's face turned a shade darker, his jaw setting in that way it always did when he was about to lay down the law. That scumbag. I knew he wasn't good enough for you. What are you going to do, Susan? I want to fight back. I want to make sure he doesn't just walk away from this, from us, like it's nothing. I want to make sure he knows he can't just toss us aside, I said, the words fueled by a mixture of hurt and a newfound strength. And so, the plan was set in motion. My dad's friend, a former cop turned private investigator, was our best shot at getting the evidence we needed. Evidence that would show the world, show Michael, that I wasn't just a forgotten wife, a discarded piece of his past. Susan, I'll take care of it. You just focus on yourself and the baby. We'll make sure this guy gets what's coming to him. The investigator, a grizzled man with eyes that had seen too much, assured me. Weeks rolled by, each one stretching longer than the last. The house, usually filled with tension, was now brimming with a silent storm, the kind that threatens to shatter everything in its wake. The private detective had done his job well, too well. The evidence he handed over was damning photos and videos that left no room for doubt. Michael's infidelity was laid bare, each image a stab in my heart. And Sarah, his colleague, the woman I had reluctantly hosted at my husband's request, was at the center of it all. "Can't believe this, can you, Susan?" my mom muttered as we sifted through the evidence one evening. Her face was a mix of anger and sympathy, her hand squeezing mine in a silent show of support. "You gonna let him get away with this? After everything?" I wiped my eyes, the reality of my situation settling like lead in my stomach. No, I can't. But it's not just me anymore. It's her too, I said, my hand instinctively resting on my swollen belly. The baby, my little girl, was due any day now, and she was all that mattered. The birth was a whirlwind, a mix of pain, fear, and overwhelming love. When they placed her in my arms, her tiny fingers curling around mine, the world faded away. She was perfect, a tiny beacon of hope in the storm that was my life. Back at my parents' house, the atmosphere was a mix of joy and worry. My parents doted on their granddaughter, their happiness tinged with concern for the future. "Susan, she's beautiful. She's got your strength, I can tell," my mom said softly, her eyes meeting mine with an understanding that went beyond words. I smiled, the weight of the past weeks easing a bit in her presence. "Thanks, Mom. She's what's keeping me going." My dad, ever the protective figure, glanced at the file that had been burning a hole in my mind. "What's the plan, Susan? You ready to face this storm head-on?" I looked at my daughter, her presence a silent reminder of the strength I had to muster. For her, I'll face anything. The air in my parents' home, usually thick with the scent of Mom's cooking and Dad's aftershave, had shifted. It was just days after my life had changed forever, bringing my daughter into the world. Her arrival was a slice of heaven in the turmoil that had become my life. Then, like a cold gust on a winter morning, Michael stormed in. His entrance was as subtle as a thunderclap, his eyes darting around, blatantly ignoring the tiny miracle in my arms. "Susan, this circus has gone on long enough," Michael began, his voice sharp, cutting the air. "I didn't marry a woman to have her lounge at her parents' place. It's time you returned and did what you're meant to do. I'm not bleeding money for a cleaner and a cook when I have you." I tightened my grip on my daughter, her innocence a stark contrast to the bitterness in front of me. "Michael, you're living in a fantasy if you think I'm stepping back into that house, back into that life. It's not happening." His laugh was cruel, devoid of humor. "Oh, really? And how do you plan on surviving, Susan? If you think I'm going to let you walk away with half of what's mine, you're sorely mistaken. I'll divorce you and make sure you don't get a dime." The audacity of his threat was almost laughable. Almost. I couldn't help but let out a chuckle, not of mirth, but of disbelief. "Michael, you're the one who's mistaken. You seem to forget, I know all about your little affair with Sarah. I'm the one filing for divorce. And with the evidence I have, let's just say you won't be the one calling the shots." His face drained of color, the arrogance melting into panic. "You're bluffing, Susan. You have nothing on me." That's when I decided it was time to lay my cards on the table. I pulled out the photos, the undeniable proof of his deceit. "Does this look like a bluff to you, Michael?" He lunged, desperation fueling his movements, but he was no match for my dad. Though years had passed since his days on the force, Dad's authority and strength hadn't waned a bit. He stepped between us, his presence alone enough to stop Michael in his tracks. "Michael, I think you've overstayed your welcome. Leave my house, and don't you dare come back threatening my daughter." Dad's voice was calm, but the underlying warning was clear as day. Fear flickered in Michael's eyes, a fear that confirmed he knew better than to argue. He backed away, his retreat as graceless as his entrance. The door shut behind him with a thud that seemed to echo my heartbeat. Silence enveloped the room for a moment, the tension slowly dissolving. I looked down at my daughter, her serene face oblivious to the storm that had just passed. She was my beacon, my reason to stand tall against the chaos. Weeks turned into a blur, a mix of sleepless nights and endless paperwork. My lawyer, Mr. Jenkins, was a no-nonsense guy, his office always smelling like strong coffee and determination. We were gearing up for a legal battle, and the air was thick with anticipation. "Susan, we're in for a rough ride. You sure you're up for this?" Mr. Jenkins asked as we sat in his office, papers spread out like a map of the battlefield ahead. I held my daughter close, feeling her steady breaths. "I've never been surer of anything, Mr. Jenkins. It's not just for me, it's for her too." The day we filed the lawsuit felt like stepping into a storm. The papers, heavy with the weight of my broken marriage, were now in the hands of the court. Mr. Jenkins was a force to be reckoned with, his every word in the courtroom sharp and precise. Then came the day of reckoning. The courtroom was imposing, its walls echoing the sound of justice. Michael was there, his face a mask, his lawyer whispering last-minute strategies. "Susan, you don't have to do this. We can work it out," Michael hissed as I passed him, a last-ditch attempt to sway me. I met his gaze, feeling nothing but the fire of resolve burning within me. "Work it out? That ship has sailed, Michael. See you in court." The hearing was intense, every word, every piece of evidence, a nail in the coffin of Michael's lies. Mr. Jenkins presented the photos, the videos, the undeniable truth of Michael's betrayal. Michael's lawyer tried to defend, to deflect, but the evidence was too strong, the betrayal too blatant. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was the sound of finality. "In light of the evidence presented, I rule in favor of Mrs. Susan Taylor. Divorce granted, full custody awarded, and Mr. Taylor, you are to pay $150,000 in compensation and $1,500 in alimony monthly." The gavel's bang was like a thunderclap, sealing Michael's fate, marking the end of a battle hard fought. But the storm wasn't over yet. The ripples of our legal battle spread, reaching the place where it all started, Michael's office. His superiors didn't take kindly to the scandal, the affair that had spilled into the public eye. Michael was demoted, the golden boy image he had cultivated shattered by his own actions. And Sarah, the other half of the deceit, found herself out of a job, her involvement with a married man staining her reputation beyond repair. The dawn of a new day never felt so real, so vivid. The courtroom battles were behind us, the storm had passed, and the world seemed to be opening up with possibilities. My daughter, now a constant source of joy and strength, was growing fast, her giggles filling the house that once echoed with arguments and despair. One morning, as the sun spilled its golden light through the windows, Mom walked into the kitchen, her smile as warm as the coffee she poured. "You know, Susan, seeing you and this little munchkin makes all the worries fade away. You've done well, really well." I looked up from feeding my daughter, her tiny hands grabbing at the spoon. "Thanks, Mom. It's been tough, but she makes it all worth it." Dad came in, his presence always so reassuring. "Susan, you've shown what real strength is. And this little one," he said, gently tickling my daughter's chin. "She's got a great mom." The days were no longer a countdown to another argument or a court date. They were filled with laughter, baby talk, and plans for the future. I had gone back to work, my old job at the trading company welcoming me back with open arms. Balancing motherhood and a career wasn't easy, but it felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had led me to a new dawn, a fresh start. As I looked around, at the photos of my daughter, at the home filled with love and support, I knew that this was just the beginning. A new chapter, not just for me, but for my little girl, a chapter where the skies were clear, and the possibilities endless. The dawn had broken, and with it, a world of hope and promise had opened up. The storm was behind us, and ahead lay nothing but the warm glow of a new day.
Hi, I'm Ava, a simple housewife and mom. The story of Mark and me wasn't always tinted with the shades of disconnect it now bore. It began like a fairy tale. Our joy multiplied when we discovered I was pregnant. We spent nights talking about our future, about the little life we were about to welcome. Mark's eyes would light up as he placed his hand on my belly, feeling the tiny kicks, a sign of the new life we created together. The day Liam was born, Mark was by my side, holding my hand and offering words of strength. "You're the strongest woman I know, Ava," he said, his voice thick with emotion. The first time he held Liam, I saw tears in his eyes, a mirror to my own. But as seasons changed, so did the color of our relationship. The man who would rush home to be with us now found reasons to stay away. "Work's been crazy," he'd say, or, "I need to sort out some things." Excuses piled up, each one chipping away at the foundation of our family. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the living room, I decided to breach the growing gap between us. "Mark, do you remember how we used to be? How we planned for Liam, how we dreamed of our future?" I asked, my voice a mix of longing and apprehension. He didn't look up from his phone. "Of course, I remember, Ava. But times change. Responsibilities grow. You wouldn't understand." I felt a sharp sting at his words. I wouldn't understand? "Mark, I'm living those changes and responsibilities with you. But it feels like I'm doing it alone. You're here, but not really with us." Mark sighed, a sound of annoyance rather than understanding. "Ava, what do you want from me? I'm providing for this family, isn't that enough?" I shook my head, the ache in my heart growing. "It's not just about providing, Mark. It's about being present, sharing moments with Liam, with me. We used to talk, laugh, and now." "Now what?" he interjected, finally looking at me, his eyes void of the warmth I once knew. "Now, I feel like a single parent. Liam asks about you, wonders why you're not around. And I miss my husband. I miss us." Mark stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. "You miss us?" "Ava, I'm right here. But I have to work, I have to ensure our future. I can't just sit around and pretend everything's fine." I watched him, the distance between us more profound than the room that held us. "Pretending isn't what I want, Mark. I want reality, our reality. But it seems like we're living in two different worlds now." He walked away without another word, leaving me in the growing darkness, the silence a stark reminder of the chasm that had formed between us. The day had started like any other, but it quickly turned into one I'd never forget. It was a typical Thursday morning, and I was in the kitchen, Liam chattering away about his toy cars. The phone rang, piercing the mundane tranquility. It was my dad, his voice usually so robust and cheerful, now reduced to a frail whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" I asked, trying to sound upbeat despite the worry that crept into my voice. "Ava, sweetheart, I've got some bad news," Dad said, and I could hear the strain in his voice, the effort it took for him to speak those words. "The doctors, they found cancer, Ava. It's bad." My heart sank, and I gripped the counter for support. "Cancer? Dad, no, that can't be right. You're always so healthy." He let out a tired sigh. "I thought so too, honey. But the tests don't lie. We're looking at our options, but the doctors, they aren't too hopeful." Tears welled up in my eyes as I struggled to process his words. I had to tell Mark, he needed to know, to be there for me, like he used to be. Mark was in his home office, buried in his work as usual. I knocked softly, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. "Mark, can I talk to you?" "It's important," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He glanced up, irritation flashing across his face. "What is it, Ava?" "I'm swamped right now." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking voice. "It's my dad. He's been diagnosed with cancer. It's serious, Mark." For a moment, there was silence. Then, to my disbelief, a smirk appeared on Mark's face. "Cancer, huh? Well, that's unfortunate. How much do you think we're talking about in terms of inheritance?" I felt a cold chill run down my spine. Inheritance? Mark, are you serious? My dad's sick, and that's all you can think about. He shrugged, his indifference cutting deeper than any knife. Well, Ava, let's be realistic. The old man's not getting any younger. It's a smart move to start thinking about what comes next. You know, for Liam and our future. Anger bubbled inside me, my hands balling into fists. You're unbelievable, Mark. My dad might be dying, and you're counting dollars? Where's your heart? Mark stood up, his expression hard and unyielding. Look, Ava, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking but too afraid to say. It's about being practical, not emotional. I stared at him, my heart pounding with a mixture of grief and rage. Practical? There's nothing practical about being a heartless jerk. My dad needs us right now, and all you care about is money. He rolled his eyes, a gesture that fueled my fury. Don't be so dramatic, Ava. It's not about the money. It's about being prepared for the future. Prepared? You call this being prepared? I shot back, my voice rising. You're so wrapped up in your own world that you can't even see the pain right in front of you. Mark let out a dismissive snort. Pain, drama, whatever you want to call it, Ava. I've got real problems to deal with. Let me know when you're done with your little emotional episode. He turned his back to me, effectively ending the conversation. I stood there, trembling with a mix of sorrow and disbelief. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that weighs heavy on your shoulders. Liam, my little ray of sunshine, had finally drifted off to sleep after what felt like hours of bedtime stories and lullabies. I crept out of his room, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Mark had been distant lately, more than usual, and it gnawed at me, a constant nagging in the back of my mind. As I made my way through the dimly lit hallway, a faint whisper stopped me in my tracks. It was coming from the living room. Mark's voice, hushed but intense, filtered through the air. A sense of unease settled over me. Who could he be talking to at this hour, and why so secretly? I edged closer, the floorboards creaking under my feet. My heart was pounding, each beat loud in the eerie silence of the night. Yeah, I'm fed up, totally fed up, Mark was saying, his voice a mix of frustration and bitterness. Ava's driving me nuts, always on my case. And the kid, always whining. It's like I can't catch a break. I felt a sting in my chest, his words slicing through me. I pressed my back against the wall, the coolness of the paint barely registering. This wasn't the Mark I knew, or at least, the Mark I thought I knew. The woman on the other end of the line giggled, her voice a sharp contrast to the turmoil swirling inside me. But honey, soon you'll be free, right? Once her old man kicks the bucket, you'll have the dough. We can ditch this dead-end life and start fresh. Mark's laugh, dark and devoid of any warmth, filled the room. You got that right. Her dad's loaded, and Ava doesn't have a clue. Once he's gone, we'll be rolling in it. Just gotta play the grieving husband for a bit, and then it's just you and me, babe. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This man, the one I had shared my life with, was plotting against me, against us, his family. The conversation continued, their words a poisonous concoction of deceit and betrayal. But with each passing moment, my shock transformed into determination. Mark thought he had it all figured out, but he was gravely mistaken. I wouldn't let him get away with this, not without a fight. The hospital's sterile smell was a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in my heart. Dad's room was at the end of the long corridor, each step towards it heavy with dread. But I needed to see him, to talk to him about the tangled web Mark had woven around us. Dad was sitting up in bed, his face drawn but his eyes bright with that familiar spark of resilience. Ava, my girl, come here, he said, his voice stronger than I'd expected. Dad, I'm so sorry. This is all just too much, I said, the words tumbling out as I took his hand, its warmth a small comfort. He squeezed my hand, a silent message of strength. Ava, we're fighters, you and me. Don't you forget that. I took a deep breath, the hospitals hum a distant noise. Dad, there's something else. It's Mark. He's not the man I thought he was. He's planning to leave me, take everything after. Dad's brow furrowed, a storm brewing in his eyes. What are you saying, Ava? That rat's planning to jump ship and take the money. I nodded, the reality of saying it aloud making it all the more painful. Yes, and it's not just that. He's got someone else, Dad. He's been talking to her, planning all this. The room was thick with tension, Dad's grip on my hand now a lifeline. That scumbag, he growled. After all you've done, all you've been through together. Dad, I don't know what to do. He's got access to everything, the accounts, the investments. If he leaves. Dad's eyes narrowed, the fighter in him rising to the surface. Listen, Ava, we're not letting him get away with this. You're my daughter, and no one messes with my family. But how, Dad? He's always one step ahead, I said, feeling the weight of despair. Dad's smile was a mix of cunning and resolve. Ava, in my days, I've dealt with plenty of rats. And the thing about rats? They always fall for the cheese. I looked at him, confusion and curiosity mingling in my thoughts. Cheese, Dad. He chuckled, a sound that echoed with a lifetime of wisdom and wit. A metaphor, my girl. We're going to set a trap, a lure so tempting that he won't be able to resist. And when he goes for it, that's when we spring the trap. I could feel a spark of hope, a flicker of the old fire that used to define me. What's the plan, Dad? We'll make him think the end is near, that the money's about to flow into your hands. His greed will blind him, make him sloppy. That's when you'll gather all the evidence you need. And when the time's right, we'll pull the rug out from under him. It was risky, a high-stakes game of deception and cunning. But it was a chance, a way to turn the tables on Mark and reclaim my life. Dad, if we do this, there's no turning back, I said, the gravity of our plot settling in. Dad's grip tightened, a silent pact between us. Ava, we're in this together. To the end. And another thing, the doctors screwed up with their diagnosis, I'm tougher than they thought. As I left the hospital that day, Dad's plan replaying in my mind, I felt a shift within me. The victim of Mark's deceit was gone, replaced by a woman ready to fight, ready to protect her family at any cost. The game was on, and I, Ava, was no longer playing by Mark's rules. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, the air thick with unsaid words, I decided to lay the first thread of our trap. Mark, I talked to the doctors today. Dad's condition, it's worse than we thought, I said, my voice steady but laced with fabricated despair. Mark looked up from his plate, his interest piqued, not by concern, but by the scent of the bait. Worse, you say? How bad are we talking? I took a deep breath, the lie bitter on my tongue. They're saying it's just a matter of weeks now. And with the will and everything. It's all going to be so sudden, so final. Mark's eyes glinted, a telltale sign of the greed stirring within. Weeks, huh? Well, that's unfortunate. But, Ava, we need to think about what comes next. The inheritance, it's going to be a big deal for us, for Liam's future. His words, so void of genuine emotion, fueled the fire inside me. Yes, Mark, the inheritance. It's all Dad has left for us. I wish it didn't have to be this way. Mark reached across the table, his hand on mine a cold comfort. Ava, it's tough, I know. But we'll get through this. And once it's all settled, we'll be in a better place, financially at least. The conversation drifted into other mundane topics, but the seed was planted, the first thread of our web intricately woven into the fabric of our daily lives. As the days passed, I fed Mark tidbits of information, each one a carefully crafted piece of the puzzle. Dad, playing his part flawlessly, relayed messages of his worsening condition, the doctor's grim prognosis echoing through our phone calls. Then came the day to set the stage for the final act. I waited for Mark to return from work, the fake death certificate a heavy weight in my hands. "Mark, I need to talk to you." "It's Dad, he's gone," I said, the words a rehearsed script of grief and loss. Mark froze, his face a mask of shock that quickly morphed into poorly concealed anticipation. "Gone? You mean?" I nodded, the tears in my eyes real, but not for the reasons he believed. "Yes, Mark. He passed away this morning. It was peaceful," they said. "But now we have to deal with everything he's left behind." Mark's demeanor changed, a predatory glint in his eye. "I'm sorry, Ava, for your loss. But we need to be practical. The inheritance, it's going to be transferred soon, right?" I swallowed the lump in my throat, the reality of his betrayal a constant ache. "Yes, the lawyers are handling it. It should be in our account in a month. $400,000, just like Dad wanted." Mark's smile was a crack in his facade, a glimpse into the depth of his deception. "Well, then, that's something. Look, I've got a business trip coming up. It's urgent, can't be delayed. I won't be able to make the funeral." I pretended to be surprised. "A business trip? Now?" "Mark, my dad just died." He stood up, his back to me as he gathered his things. "I know, Ava, and I'm sorry. But this is important. For our future. You understand, right?" As he left, the final piece of our web in place, I knew the moment of reckoning was near. Mark, with his plans and his mistress, was walking right into the trap we'd set. The hospital room was quiet when I entered, the steady beep of the heart monitor in sync with the racing of my own heart. Dad's face lit up when he saw me, a mix of concern and determination in his tired eyes. "Hey, Dad. Mark's gone." "He fell for it, left for his so-called business trip," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad gave a knowing nod, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "I knew he would. That man's as predictable as a cheap clock. Now, listen, Ava, it's time for the next step. Here," he said, passing me a small piece of paper, "is the number of a guy you need to meet. Frank. He's the best private investigator around. He'll turn Mark's world upside down." I clutched the paper, feeling a surge of determination. "Thanks, Dad. I'll call him right away. We can't let Mark get away with this." Picking up my phone, I dialed the number, my heart pounding with every ring. A gruff voice answered. "Frank speaking." "Hi, Frank. I'm Ava. My dad recommended I speak to you. It's about my husband. I need to prove his infidelity and his plans against me." Frank's voice was calm, reassuring. "You've come to the right place, Ava. I've seen all sorts of lowlifes in my time. Tell me everything, and I'll take care of the rest." As I recounted the sordid details, Frank listened without interruption, the occasional "huh" punctuating my tale of betrayal. "All right, Ava. I've got a clear picture now. I'll start tailing your husband immediately. You'll get regular updates from me." And he did it. Photographs of Mark with his mistress, their body language painting a picture no words needed to describe, recordings of their conversations filled with scorn for me and excitement for the future they wrongly believed they were about to steal from under me. Each piece of evidence was a blow, but also a building block in the case I was building against Mark. I stored everything carefully, a dossier of deceit that would soon come crashing down on him. One evening, as I sat in the dim light of the living room after putting Liam to bed, I reviewed the latest batch of evidence. The sound of their laughter, the sight of them cozying up, it hurt, but it also fueled my resolve. Dad's voice from our last conversation echoed in my head. "Ava, he's a fool. And fools tend to dig their own graves. You just make sure you're there to push him in." For a whole month, I had been a silent warrior, balancing my role as Liam's mom with the covert operation to expose Mark's treachery. My days were filled with phone calls to Dad, updates from Frank, and nights spent sifting through the evidence of Mark's betrayal. Then my phone rang, shattering the silence of the evening. It was Mark, his voice a blend of confusion and urgency. "Ava, what the hell's going on? I just checked our account, and it's practically empty. Where's the money from your old man's will?" I let out a cold laugh, the sound echoing the bitterness in my heart. "Oh, Mark, you really are clueless, aren't you? There's no inheritance because Dad's not dead. He's very much alive." Mark's confusion turned into disbelief. "Alive? But, Ava, you told me. Why the hell would you say he passed away?" I leaned against the kitchen counter, the cool marble against my skin a stark contrast to the heat of the moment. "I needed to see how low you'd go, Mark. And guess what? You didn't just go low, you hit rock bottom. Running off with your girlfriend, plotting to snatch my inheritance, you really outdid yourself." Mark's voice shook, a cocktail of fear and realization. "Wait, Ava, what are you talking about? What evidence?" The smirk on my face was one of triumph, a warrior savoring her victory. "I'm talking about the snapshots of your infidelity, the sweet recordings of your betrayal. Frank's been quite the busy bee. We've got everything, Mark. Every rendezvous, every nasty plan spelled out loud and clear." Panic laced Mark's words, a symphony of desperation. "Ava, please, let's talk about this. It's not what you think. We can fix this, can't we?" But the time for talking had long passed. "Fix this? Mark, you shattered everything. There's nothing left to fix. I'm filing for divorce, and I'll make sure the judge hears every sordid detail of your escapades. Infidelity, planned fraud, and don't think I've forgotten about child support." Mark's pleas were a drowning man's grasp at straws. "No, Ava, don't do this. I'm begging you. Give me a chance to make things right." The resolve in my voice was ironclad, the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. "A chance? It's too late, Mark. The game's over." The phone line went silent, the end of an era, the curtain call of a marriage built on lies. As I hung up, the reality of it all sank in. The trap had been sprung, the prey ensnared. The courtroom was an arena where truth battled deceit, and today, it was the battleground for my new beginning. Mark sat across from me, a mere shell of the man I once knew. His eyes darted around, avoiding my gaze, a silent testament to his guilt. I sat upright, my resolve as firm as the wooden back of the chair supporting me. The judge entered, his presence commanding immediate respect. "We're here to address the case of Mrs. Parker versus Mr. Parker," he began, his voice authoritative and impartial. "This court will not tolerate deceit and betrayal. Mr. Parker, how do you respond to the charges against you?" Mark's voice trembled, a stark contrast to his usual bravado. "Your Honor, I admit I made mistakes. But I'm not the villain she's making me out to be. Please, I'm asking for a chance to make things right." I couldn't help but scoff quietly at his plea. Standing up, I addressed the courtroom, my voice steady and clear. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks louder than his hollow words. This man, who vowed to be a partner and father, chose betrayal and greed instead. His actions shattered our family. He doesn't deserve leniency, he deserves to face the full weight of his actions." The judge nodded solemnly, his eyes scanning the room. "The court has reviewed the evidence, and it's clear. Mr. Parker, you are to pay $200,000 for your betrayal and $2,000 monthly for child support. You've broken trust in the most egregious way, and today, you are held accountable for your actions." Mark's face fell, the finality of the judgment a crushing blow to his delusions of escape. The gavel struck, the sound echoing the closing of a painful chapter. As I stepped out of the courtroom, the sunlight greeted me like a long-lost friend. Liam came running, his little steps quick with anticipation. "Mom, is it over? Can we go home now?" I scooped him into my arms, his presence a reminder of the life that awaited beyond the courtroom's walls. "Yes, my love, it's over. We're starting anew, just the two of us, stronger and braver. Dad approached, his strides confident, his smile wide. Ava, you did it. You stood your ground and showed him you're not someone to mess with. This is your new beginning, your time to shine. I glanced at Dad, then down at Liam, my heart swelling with pride and hope. Yes, Dad. It's our time. A new chapter, one we write ourselves.